Welcome to May's What to Do Now in Your Garden. I always tend to think of May as a sort of transition month, moving between spring and summer. And there's just so much going on in the garden. That big surge in spring, the sort of perennials and the early bulbs and some of the shrubs, now just starting to slowly fade. But of course, they're being replaced by a whole slew of new plants coming into growth. The peonies are about to flower, the lupins are pushing up. Perhaps most excitingly, all the roses are in bud and ready to go. Now, of course, there are hundreds of garden tasks to be getting on with. I'd like to share just one of them with you now. Getting a plant into the ground kind of seems like the most basic thing in the world, doesn't it? But I have seen people do it in some truly bizarre and extraordinary ways. So I thought I'd do a really basic planting 101. Now, I'm sure you probably know all of this back to front, but there might be a few useful tips in there as well. So I'm going to get this little shrub into the ground. It's called Althea cannabina. It's a relative of Lavatera. It's got little pink flowers, and there's a bit of a kind of pink mauve theme going on in this corner. So first thing is to get the planting pit prepared. Now, the soil here is fairly free draining. It's quite open. So it's absolutely ideal for the plant getting into the ground. But if you need to alter your soil, this is the moment to do it while you're creating the planting pit. So it might be that you add a little bit of grit to make it more free draining. It might be that you add some garden compost to really improve the water retention. Now, I've dug a hole here, which is probably sort of 5 or so centimetres deeper than the actual plant. And so the key thing is that the bottom of the hole is now made up of really kind of well turned over, light, fluffy soil. This kind of stuff that the roots are going to easily make their way into. So with that done, I can now depot my plant. You often see advice about teasing out roots of plants. Now, the only plants you truly need to do this with is woody, shrubby plants. Herbaceous plants don't need it. And quite honestly, you can end up doing them more damage. So this is a herbaceous plant. It's got soft roots. I don't need to do anything to it. I'm going to offer it into the pit just here. Just checking the levels, making sure that the nursery line or the level that it was in the pot is going to be replicated in the ground. So it's just going to be slightly lower, filling the soil back in. Now, this is one of the absolute key bits for me. So often you see people pushing on the top of the plant, and that is going to have all sorts of calamitous consequences. It's going to split the roots underground, it's going to mash up the root ball. It's not going to do you any good at all. All you really want to do is go around the sides and get this soil to firm in so it's in contact with the roots, and so the plant can extract that water and nutrition most easily. And then finally, as ever, I always tends to do this, I worked in South Africa years ago, and this was a standard thing that was done with all planting, which is to create this little moat around the outside, which just means when I come to water this, water won't run away, it will go directly down to the roots. So there it is, folks. Planting 101, pretty much guaranteed this will establish well, I hope. Now, here are a whole load of other gardening jobs that you can get on with in May.
In May, we really want to make the most of our herbaceous perennials, and there's a technique that can really help them to keep working hard for us throughout the summer, and it's called the Chelsea chop. So called because it's normally done after the RHS flower show, so it's a really good reminder for us in our calendar, and it's a great way of being able to make sure that we can keep the plants going for longer. Why do the Chelsea chop? The reason why we want to do this is to prolong flowering. So it's a way of having some flowers now, but also having flowers later in the season. It also helps certain plants to not get too leggy and flop over. Things like sedums, the hylatophyllum here, are notoriously open and splay if they get too big going further into the season. And it's just a really good way of making sure that throughout the garden that we can keep the succession of flowering going. There are 2 techniques of how you can do the Chelsea chop. One is to take a clump of your herbaceous perennials, so say like this is sedum, or should I say hylatophyllum matrona, And you can actually just cut it down by half, the whole amount. Or if you feel that's too brutal for you, you can go through a clump of flowers. So for example, it might be something like penstemons or echinacea. Achillea works really well on the Peter as well. And you might only want to cut it back by about a third so that you'll leave some flowering for now. And then you'll go to another part within that clump and you'll cut that down. So you've got like staged flowering. So either technique is really fine. So what I'm going to do with this clump of the sedum is quite big, and I know that come September time, if I didn't cut it back, it could actually start to splay open and not look so great. So you literally take your secateurs and we'll come in here and cut it back by about a third to half. And of course you might start thinking, well, is this all going to go to waste? Of course it could go on the compost if you're able to do that. But here's one that was made earlier. This was potted up and has been cuttings from last year, and it's a way of also creating more plants. So depending how big your clump is, what you're able to do within your garden, new plants or great compost. Either way round, you're not going to regret doing this technique. And once you finish the task, cutting back your perennial plant, don't forget to give it a really good water and a feed.
You don't need a vast allotment to grow veg, you know. If all you've got's a doorstep or the tiniest of patios or balconies, you can still grow things to eat. What you need is a large pot, like this one. I say large because small ones tend to dry out, and if you're away all day at work, you'll come home and find your plant's completely desiccated. This one here, I've planted up with lettuces. They're already started to grow. It seems to do it within minutes of being planted. The compost I'm using is good, ordinary, peat-free, multi-purpose. Here's a large pot, good drainage holes in the bottom, of course, to allow any surplus water to escape. There I put lettuces. Here I'm putting dwarf French beans. You can buy them now in strips like this, and when you push them from below, out they will come with their little root balls. Now, if you're really mean, you can split these, but to be absolutely honest, in a pot like this, 4 of these trios put in will give you an absolute welter of beans. So use your hand as a trowel, pop it in there like that, and just work them all the way around. There's no way that these are going to outcompete one another, and some are going to do better than others, because if you make sure they never go short of water, and on days like this that's quite vital, they will romp away. And then after about 3 to 4 weeks, you can start liquid feeding them once or twice a week. Dilute liquid tomato feed will do well. Kept in the sun, kept well watered, and just allowed to grow away and do what they want. You'll be picking beans off those in a couple of months. Lovely thing to have in the tiniest space. Of course, that's one way of growing them from plants. You can also grow from seed, even cheaper. A pot like this with radishes or spring onions, just make little drills. Now a drill is a miniature furrow, and this piece of cane pushed along the surface of the soil like this will make furrows in which you can sow your seeds. The way I like to sow is always to put some in my hand and then sprinkle them almost like salt on your fish and chips, you know, you used to do when you were poor, and let the seeds settle about half an inch apart. These are radishes. That will give them room to grow right the way along those drills. Any spare seeds pop back in the packet, and then pull the compost with your fingers right the way across. I've moistened this before I sowed them to make it easier to do, but I will, along with the French beans, give them a really good watering in with a rose, a sprinkler head on the end, to settle them in position and avoid any kind of check, particularly with the plants. And there you have 3 large potfuls, which will give you lettuces, dwarf beans and radishes. It'll take you next to no time to do them, and boy, will you feel proud when you're picking your first crop.
Getting your shrubs off to a good start in life doesn't really just end in planting. You need to do some basic pruning, some formative pruning, if you're going to get your shrub off to a really good start. And by taking some of the top growth off, you'll balance it more with the root growth, which means the plant will get really well established. So what sort of things can we prune off this plant? Well, to start with, we've got lots of twiggy growth around the bottom of the plant. It's just going to waste energy on the plant. So that can all come off for a start. So just go right down to the bottom of the plant, right down to the main stem, and prune that twiggy growth right back to the base. A few more little twiggy bits around here. A few wispy bits right down at the bottom. And then come back up through the plant and you'll find that here we've got two branches that are crossing. They're very closely placed and they're crossing, and they'll just rub together and cause problems in later life for the shrub. So take one of those pairs of branches out, right down back to the main trunk again. And then if you come down again through the plant, look down to the main stem, there's a bit of broken twig there. That can come off. And again, some more little twiggy pieces around the back here. And then look at the rest of the shrub. And it's all quite long and lanky. And what we want to do is we want to encourage some really strong shoots to come from low down on the plant. So if we trace that back down this main stem, for example, come back down to about half its length and prune back there to a bud. And then prune here to a bud. And go round and cut back all these leader stems. Looks a bit brutal, but actually it will repay you dividends because it's making the plant more compact. And as I say, going to encourage some more stems to come from lower down on the plant. This very strong shoot at the back here, that can be pruned back by about half its length. And then a few broken pieces of twig this side that need to come off. I'm afraid to say I damaged that bit when I was planting it. And then the last few twiggy bits off at the bottom. And there you have it. A bit denuded, you might think, a bit gaunt, but that plant will soon recover. It will soon balance out its root growth, get really well established, and then it will grow really strongly and reward you for years to come.
If you enjoyed this video, then why not join us next month for a whole slew of new garden tasks that you can be getting on with. And in the meantime, why not like and subscribe?